I will be doing my presentation on the Hutu people that currently reside in Rwanda and Burundi. Basic info on some of the Hutu people. The Hutu people moved into the Great Lakes region of Africa around the 11th century. The Hutu people were later succeeded by the Tutsi who moved into the area around 4 centuries later. Interesting enough, the Hutu and Tutsi share about the same kind of traditions. They don't really look any different from one another. They speak the same languages. They carry the same traditions. However, they discriminated against one another for a good bit of time, and that discrimination culminated with a genocide committed by the Hutu in 1994, where 800,000 Tutsi were murdered within 100 days. The geography of Rwanda and Burundi, where the Hutu reside, has a very warm climate. The climate ranges between 50 and 100 degrees Fahrenheit, with averages being up in the upper 80s to 90s for highs throughout the day. It's typically pretty dry, but there are two rainy seasons, with one between October and November, and a second one lasting from March to May. The one in October and November is much more responsible for a lot of the rainfall that's provided to the area. Lakes do populate much of the area between Rwanda and Burundi. The Victoria Basin, which is considered to be the source of the river Nile, takes up a large part of the land that surrounds the area. Other parts of the region are covered by grasslands, mountains, savannas, and shrublands. The ecology of Rwanda and Burundi includes many, many different species of plants, animals, and birds. Mammals include zebras, otters, giraffes, impalas, gorillas, monkeys, mice, and hippos, among many other different mammals that populate the area. There are over 300 different species of plants throughout the area, many of which you won't find anywhere else in the world. Over 280 species of birds also reside in the area, many of which you could find nowhere else really else in the world. A lot of the staple foods and the diet of the Hutu people include a lot of plants that are grown throughout the region. Protein is not typically included in the diet as they don't consume meat a whole lot. Many of the staple foods would include bananas, plantains, maize, sweet potatoes, beans, and cassava. A popular dish is ugali, which is made of maize and water rolled together to form a porridge consistency. Pictured, you'll see ugali on the left, the white looks like mashed potatoes. The religious traditions of the Hutu. The modern day Hutu typically practiced Christianity as it was brought in with the colonization of the area with the Germans and the Belgians. The Hutu traditional religion worships the god Amana. This god was viewed as being very humanistic with a lot of human qualities. However, it would seem that he was very distant from those who were worshiping him, and the Hutu also place a great deal of respect upon their dead. Those who have passed away are called the Abisma. These spirits are those who are the ancestors of the Hutu. Their spirits are considered to be easily angered, with gifts offered in order to appease the Abisma and gain protection from them. The cultural tradition of dance in the Hutu culture involves the Entor. The Entor roughly translates to being the chosen ones, and they are selected to be the ones who perform traditional dances. Dancers are chosen based upon physical and moral qualities. They are trained on how to conduct themselves not only through dancing, but within the royal court for the Mwami, who is the king. For it's very important that they conduct themselves in a proper manner to the royal court. Dances will consist of shouts to display inner confidence and strength, accompanied by a group of 13 drummers, as 13 is the royal number of Rwanda and Burundi. The cultural traditions of art for the Hutu people begin with the end of the harvest season. Between the harvest and planting seasons, much of the craft is made by the Hutu, and this includes pottery, metalwork, jewelry, mask making, as well as basket weaving. Making of these works is now not only just a tradition as it used to be, it's now also a source of income due to the demand for the artistic creations coming from the area and the Hutu people themselves. The natural resources of Rwanda and Burundi include gold, tin ore, methane, coffee, tea, and green beans. Tea leaves and coffee beans have been the main export for each country and provide a large source of income for many Hutu farmers throughout the region. Languages of the Hutu and surrounding peoples originated with the African Bantu languages. In Rwanda, it is known as Kinyarwanda. In Burundi, it is known as Kurundi, although they are both one and the same. With the colonization efforts during the 19th century, French began to replace the Bantu languages as the more common practiced language. In modern day Rwanda and Burundi, French is considered to be the educated language, and anyone who receives a formal education throughout these parts will be taught French and will speak French as their primary language. Some misconceptions of the Hutu people is that they were viewed as being very inferior to the Tutsi people who they reside with. And one of the other misconceptions that came along with that was due to the genocide committed by the Hutu people on the Tutsi when they murdered 800,000 people within 100 days for solely political reasons. However, a lot of the political pressure surrounding Hutu people because they respect authority and they do not question it. So when they are given orders by someone who is higher up than they are, if they did not carry out these orders, they themselves were killed. So, in essence, many of the Hutu people did not want this genocide to happen, but it was these very far right groups that had taken power that were demanding that these things take place. This video with this link contains a testimonial from several different people who lived throughout the genocide. It provides good insight into the suffering that was endured by those affected. The economic system of the Hutu people is heavily reliant upon the livestock to help them with the crops, as well as using crops like tea and coffee to create a source of income. The Hutu people have traditionally been the poorest class of people as they were relegated to farming positions when the Tutsis came in and conquered them, taking power from them in the 15th century. Modern day Rwanda and Burundi have undergone an economic revolution of sorts. The end of the genocide marked a new beginning for the region. Factories increased their output of economic resources by over 1,000 times. Factories also became more technologically advanced, so this not only provided the ability to increase the production of goods, but also employed people living in the area, therefore giving Hutu people better opportunity away from farming. The traditional education of Hutu, well, prior to 1994 and the genocide, Hutu children rarely received much of a formal education. Education would center around the cultural traditions such as basket making, mask making, hunting, gathering, war skills, and ironsmithing. Here you see some of the baskets that were produced by the women of the Hutu culture. Hutu education in present day, today kids kind of go through something similar to Western society has for their education. Kids will go to 6 years of primary school, 3 years of lower secondary, and then 3 more years of upper secondary education. Because of this, the literacy rate of the country has skyrocketed. Prior to 1970, only 4 in 10 Hutu people were literate. Now, in current day, 7 in 10 Hutu people are literate with being able to read and write. The political system of the Hutu prior to colonization was that they were basically ruled over by the Tutsi, and the king, or the Mwami as it is in their culture, was the center of life for both the Hutu and the Tutsi people. He was considered to be a divine embodiment of the Rwandan and Burundian hills and was God's representative on earth as he held all political power. Once there was colonization that took place in 1894, the Mwami would be forced to bend to the authority of the Germans and then the Belgians later on, while still being allowed to retain his position. And after World War I ended, the Belgians became the administering authority under the system of the League of Nations. Right around the time of the 1960s towards the 1970s, an independence movement started to become more and more popular throughout the nations of Burundi and Rwanda. Eventually, the Hutu organized themselves in a much better manner and were able to successfully overthrow the monarchy that had been in place for so long. The government became a big opportunity for the Hutu people to finally take control of the areas, with the first president being elected as a Hutu himself. However, power was rather corrupt, and elections were not really fair and free in many senses. The tensions that arose between the Tutsi and the Hutu due to this would lead to the genocide of the Tutsi people by the Hutu in 1994. And the political system today is a legislative power that is vested within the Senate and the Chamber of Deputies. The executive part of the government is headed by the president. Not unlike what you see in Europe, just they have a prime minister rather than a president. There's a multi party system that exists within the government, and one fun fact about this is that Rwanda is one of only two nations with a majority female parliament.